Today, perhaps more than ever, the world is loud enough to drown a heartbeat. But the soul who remains powerful learns to make silence thunder. In the theater of the psyche, the protagonist walks out of the crowd and into a room with no applause, only breath. Detachment is not a cold exit, it is the warm return to the seat of authority. Stoic elders knew this. The inner citadel is built brick by brick, not from indifference to life, but from intimacy with what cannot be taken. The unseen curriculum is rigorous. The ego, terrified of dissolving, invents dramas to stay relevant. The shadow, hungry for light, slips messages through dreams and sudden irritations. Individuation begins when the hero stops chasing reflections and faces the dark water directly. The ancient and the modern shake hands here. Trauma echoes in the nervous system, but so does discipline. Strength speaks softly and carries no one, least of all your longing. Across coals, it refuses to walk itself. Look closely at the figure who detaches without turning numb. This one doesn't abandon love. This one abandons bargaining. The currency of external validation is refused at the door. In the male unconscious, the warrior's need for conquest becomes a need to conquer the self's impulsive tides. In the female unconscious, the ancient sovereign resists the urge to mother chaos, and instead births boundaries like luminous walls. Both energies live in every soul. They steady one another. Animus lends structure to feeling. Anima lends compassion to law. Epictetus would nod. Control is a small kingdom, but it is real. Mood, meaning, and movement of attention are the territories to govern. Everything else is weather. You have felt the hook of approval dig into the skin of your self-worth. You have sensed the old wound opening whenever silence falls between messages, whenever a door closes, whenever someone turns away, as if your value could be canceled by their mood. The shadow remembers the first time absence felt like proof of unlovability. That memory tries to steer the ship. But watch the one who has studied the ocean. This person has sat through waves that never arrived. They practiced negative visualization, not to suffer twice, but to meet uncertainty like an honored guest. When loss finally knocked, it discovered a room arranged for truth, not panic. The candles were already lit. That is the architecture of detachment. Prepare the nervous system to greet life without begging it to behave. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the briefness of everything, the strange comedy of outrage repeating itself across centuries. See how the archetypal observer in you turns from the spectacle and asks a harder question. What depends on you? Not their temperature, not their choices, not the tide of fortune or the algorithm of attention. What depends on you is where the gaze rests. The sovereign gaze does not stare at locked doors. It looks inward with the sharp kindness of a blade that only cuts illusion. The ego protests, staging rehearsals for revenge or rescue. It wants the persona to gleam again. But the deeper self knows the game. Projection is a mirror infestation. The one who detaches reclaims each projection like a lost pet. Anger, envy, need, and trains it at home before releasing it to wander responsibly in the world. There is a ritual to this. It begins whenever desire tries to sprint. The detached soul slows to a deliberate walk. Breath descends, shoulders lower, voice becomes fewer words. A sacred gap opens between sensation and response. In that gap, self-respect grows like a tree. The roots, accurate naming. This is fear. This is control. This is the old wound asking for a replay. Seneca would approve of such economy. No melodrama, no psychiatric poetry, to disguise a simple fact. Naming neutralizes. You can feel the emotion fully without letting it rule. The emotion becomes weather again. The witness remains the climate. Imagine the archetype of the smith hammering red iron into a blade. Each strike is a moment of restraint. You want to reply too quickly. The smith waits. You want to explain your worth. The smith shapes silence into a sword. You want to cling to what is leaving. The smith heats the urge until it becomes malleable, then folds it into patience. Detachment is not an escape. It is a transmutation of heat into clarity. The blade does not chase. It simply holds a standard. Only what aligns may enter, and what fails to align is neither condemned nor pursued. It is returned to the world without ceremony. Listen to the whisper beneath your thoughts. Nothing outside you can deliver what your architecture refuses to host. Build the hall within, pillars of routine, arches of contemplation, doors of firm endings, windows of honest beginnings. Practice voluntary discomfort where comfort has made you soft. Walk without the crutch of constant noise. Eat without the sugar of praise. Sleep without the narcotic of fantasy. The nervous system learns. The psyche, once chaotic, begins to trust you. And when it trusts you, it stops negotiating with storms. It moves like a river that knows the mountain. The figure of detachment stands like a lighthouse on a cliff, where waves of praise and criticism lash the stone and change nothing. The storm still arrives, but the beam remains precise. Watch closely. Their power is not armor, it is alignment. There is no hardness that refuses to feel, only clarity that refuses to be steered by unexamined feeling. The ego tries, staging little puppet plays in the mind, exaggerated triumphs or catastrophes, rehearsals that feed on adrenaline. Yet the sovereign within does not attend those performances. Instead, a ritual takes root. Attention is recalled like a loyal hound, named, seated, and tasked. Wherever attention is placed becomes sacred. Wherever attention is withdrawn becomes fog. This is how the inner climate is authored. In the silence after a wound is touched, the old body memory rises, the childhood echo, the parental shadow, the early verdict that whispered, do more, be more, earn your place. Psychological projection keeps those judges alive by painting them onto partners, bosses, strangers. The detached one notices the paintbrush in the hand. Rather than begging the world to change color, the brush is cleaned. Return to sender, the soul murmurs without resentment. The face of the present is released from the weight of the past. This is shadow work as devotion. Adopt every orphaned emotion. Teach it the house rules, and do not let it rule the house. Then there is the discipline of unsent answers. Passions demand speeches, explanations, defenses, clarifications, drafted in the heat of an agitated nervous system. But the archetypal archer refuses to shoot arrows in a windstorm. Words are written, held, read aloud to the quiet, and burned. The message that remains after fire is the only message worth sending. This is not suppression. It is refinement. It is the difference between being moved and being manipulated by movement. 2 or 3 deliberate breaths, low and slow, deliver the body back to the citadel. The amygdala can shout. The gate does not open on shouting. Consider the Stoic practice of roles. The world is a stage, yes, but not a carnival. The role assigned today, teacher, builder, friend, leader, lover, comes with its own ethics. The powerful soul plays the role fully and lightly at once, like a dancer who does not mistake a costume for skin. Detachment is the art of removing glue from identity. When the role shifts, the self does not tear. it changes garments. A parent archetype can fold into a warrior when boundaries are needed. A warrior can soften into a healer when tenderness is true. Fluidity is not confusion. It is sovereignty refusing to be trapped by a single mask. The nervous system is taught to kneel at a single altar: reality. Not fantasy, not fear's prediction, not hope's bargain. Amor fati, the love of fate, does not mean approving of every event. It means honoring reality as the only ground from which wise action can grow. Watch the one who practices this. Loss arrives, and instead of accusation, there is an immediate inventory. What remains within control? Breath, posture, attention, actions aligned with value. Everything else is offered back to the river. This surrender is not weakness. The river laughs at rigid swimmers. The stone that rests becomes a mountain. The twig that thrashes breaks. Memento mori cuts through bargaining like a bell through fog. Mortality is not a threat, it is a clarifier. When the hourglass becomes visible, petty negotiations evaporate. The gaze turns toward the truly durable goods: character, virtue, the skill of meeting each moment cleanly. The person who remembers death does not grovel for scraps of validation. They invest attention in the only portfolio that compounds forever: the caliber of response. To live with such remembrance is to walk with a lantern that cannot be shaken out, even in grief. There is also the discipline of sacred scarcity. Floods of input dilute the will. The detached one curates the sensory diet, the way an athlete curates training, intentionally, cyclically, with room for recovery. Periods of chosen solitude sharpen the mind until it cuts through illusion without cruelty. Social silence becomes a forge. From it emerges speech that is short, accurate, and kind. External noise wanes, internal music returns. The body learns to generate calm rather than hunt for it in other people's eyes. Trauma taught the organism to brace. Detachment retrains it to bow without collapsing. The difference is subtle but decisive. Bowing acknowledges force and creates flexibility. Collapsing evacuates presence and invites violation. Notice how the powerful soul bows to reality, acknowledges pain, names it, breathes with it, then rises with a question that resets direction. What serves the highest value here? Not the loudest emotion, not the most seductive storyline, but the highest value. This is individuation in motion, the many within becoming obedient to a single inner law. When desire arrives, it is greeted like a traveler, offered water, asked its destination, and escorted to the right road. Some desires go to the workshop to be shaped into disciplined goals. Others go to the garden to be composted into patience. None are allowed to take the throne. The throne is reserved for conscience. And when conscience rules, attachment to outcomes loosens. Effort is controlled. Result is observed. Praise becomes information, not oxygen. Rejection becomes information, not poison. Both are notes in weather. Neither defines the sky. There is a way the powerful soul exits a room, quietly, with the spine as a standard and the heart unspilled. No slammed doors, no rattled keys of explanation, only the soft thud of a boundary taking root. The boundary is not a wall against love, it is a doorway for truth. Watch how the archetypal gatekeeper inside chooses what crosses the threshold. Panic arrives dressed as urgency. The gatekeeper asks it to sit. Flattery arrives carrying flowers. The stems are checked for thorns of obligation. Guilt knocks loudly. It is offered tea and shown the calendar. Not today. This is the discipline of distance, a sacred measurement between stimulus and soul, where dignity breathes. The undisciplined self fuses with every atmosphere. The disciplined one is its own climate, and visiting weather must adapt or pass by. The psyche, when trained, becomes a court of accurate law. In that court, the prosecutor, fear, presents catastrophes with theatrical flair. The defense, hope, promises fantasy as compensation. But the judge is neither. The judge is conscience, calm, slow, committed to evidence. You have been in the court where childhood verdicts were accepted without cross-examination. You have felt the sentence: over-explain, over-perform, overshare. Now watch the retrial. Evidence is reviewed. Did their silence mean rejection or simply their own weather? Did your longing indicate deficiency or aliveness misdirected? The judgment becomes clean. Act from value. Disregard rumor. The bailiff, discipline, escorts out all unverified stories. The sentence becomes a practice. Fewer promises, more presence. Fewer bargains, more boundaries. Fewer apologies for existing. More gratitude for the chance to aim well today. There is a tender ferocity in self-parenting. The inner child cries for immediate soothing through praise, attention, or proximity. The inner parent kneels, meets the eyes, and names the need beneath the noise. For some, it is safety. For others, significance. For many, the relief of being seen without performing. The detached one provides that sight from within, consistently and without spectacle. This closes the market for emotional quick fixes. Intermittent reinforcement, those irregular rewards that kept you addicted to a person's unpredictable kindness, loses power when the nervous system is fed steadily by ritual. The ritual might be simple: dawn light on skin, 3 pages of uncensored thought, movement until sweat baptizes the day, a brief meditation where thoughts are observed, like birds migrating. These are not hacks. They are homing beacons. They remind the psyche where shelter truly is. Ambition, when purified, becomes service. The archetypal king or queen does not chase applause. The realm is tended. Work is chosen for its alignment, not its optics. The Stoic stance rescues ambition from ego's theater. To want influence is natural. To need audience is captivity. The detached one pursues mastery with a light touch, as if holding a flame that would die if gripped too hard. Marcus Aurelius returns here. Do what is in accordance with nature. Let the action be precise, the motive clean, the outcome whatever it will be. The market may cheer or forget. The craft remains a vow. This internal vow dissolves the panic of comparison. Someone else's ascent is not your fall. It is weather across another mountain. The only relevant audit remains. Did attention serve virtue today? Relationships test detachment, the way fire tests metal. Attraction can be a summons to growth or a rehearsal of injury. The detached soul reads the summons carefully. Chemistry alone is never sufficient. Character is the solvent in which love keeps its shape. Observe the ritual of pacing. Intimacy is not poured, it is decanted. Disclosure arrives in steps that the nervous system can carry without trembling into dependency. Enthusiasm is allowed, but it is braided with discernment. Enthusiasm asks, how can we merge? Discernment asks, how do we maintain two sovereigns meeting at the border? The border is not a prison fence. It is a living bridge. When conflict arises, detachment prevents collapse into old theaters. The conversation is held at the level of behavior and principle rather than identity and verdict. When X happens, Y is needed replaces you are always or you never. The flame of regard burns steadier because oxygen, space, is available. There is also the art of clean endings. Detachment ensures that when a chapter closes, it closes without graffiti. No triangulation, no final darts. Gratitude is spoken, even if only in the heart. And the path is walked forward with a straight back. The psyche recognizes that grief is not a malfunction, but a cleansing river. Allowing sorrow to do its work without converting it into self-blame is power. The shadow's last trick is to insist that loss confirms a secret worthlessness. The detached one refuses this enchantment. Worth is not argued, it is enacted. By rising, by continuing the craft, by blessing what remains and pruning what does not, value is proven without debate. You are invited to practice a ruthless gentleness with your time. Every no to misalignment is a yes to depth. This does not require cruelty. It requires clarity delivered early. The sovereign communicates expectations before resentment grows teeth. Where chaos once seduced, stillness now seduces. Where scarcity once pushed, sufficiency now steadies. The organism learns to trust the steward within, who refuses to trade long-term peace for short-term reassurance. Power settles like a lion at rest, alert, unprovoked, profoundly uninterested in circus tricks. The powerful learn to schedule their hearts the way a master mariner schedules tides. Time becomes a discipline, not a tyrant. Notice the one who gives an emotion a window to be felt, then a doorway to leave. The calendar, once a battlefield of obligations and hidden resentments, turns into a sanctuary of chosen vows. Detachment ripens wherever there is rhythm. Waking rituals that settle the animal. Work blocks consecrated to craft. Dusk hours surrendered to silence. The undirected day invites the ghost of other people's agendas to set the tone. The directed day invites conscience to conduct. And conscience conducts with an ear for the eternal. What would still matter if no one clapped? Perspective cleans the lens. There is a practice, old as constellations, the view from above. See the city as a cluster of lanterns. See yourself as one moving point among many. The argument that felt like a verdict becomes a flicker. The career panic becomes a cloud passing. The lover's delayed reply becomes a single heartbeat in an ocean. This altitude humbles ego without scolding it. From high above, the self is freed from obsession with its outline. From deep within, the self is renewed by contact with what cannot be reduced. Presence without ornament. The detached soul visits both realms in one breath, up to the stars for context, down to the body for reality, and then returns to the task at hand, which is always, choose the next clean action. Envy arrives like smoke through a keyhole. It fogs perception and whispers scarcity. The archetypal alchemist does not open windows in panic. The smoke is studied, its ingredients named. Beneath envy, admiration misnamed, dormant desire, forgotten discipline. The transmutation is precise. Convert comparison into curriculum. Let another's brightness declare a standard, not a theft. You are not late. You were gathering wood. Now light the fire and stop staring at other flames. The detached one refuses to outsource destiny to jealousy. Radiance, after all, is not a place to arrive. It is the residue of alignment. When masculine and feminine currents within are braided, presence deepens. The masculine principle offers containment, structure without suffocation, order without obsession. The feminine principle offers depth, intuition without drift, tenderness without erosion. Imbalance breeds performance, rigid perfectionism, masquerading as strength, or endless availability masquerading as love. Balance breeds sovereignty. The inner king or queen enforces law. The inner magician revises maps. The lover opens the palace doors to wonder. The warrior locks them when necessary. Each archetype bows to conscience, never to impulse. This is individuation, made visible in the posture, in the voice, in the eyes that no longer beg. Perfectionism used to be the altar where self-worth was sacrificed. The detached soul replaces that altar with a studio. There, repetition is sacred, and mistakes are teachers with tired feet. The brush is lifted daily, not to prove value, but to practice truth. Craft becomes a moving prayer, not "look how extraordinary," but "let this be accurate." The marketplace's nervous energy fades into background weather. Numbers fluctuate, technique steadies, applause is accepted, not inhaled. Silence is accepted, not feared. The craft itself becomes the companion, whose loyalty cannot be purchased or lost. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Jaw clenches to hold back unsaid defenses. Shoulders rise to meet imaginary verdicts. Breath flutters in the upper chest like a trapped bird. The sovereign learns the language of fascia and nervous system. Detachment is taught somatically. Lengthen exhale, soften gaze, broaden stance. Let the tongue rest against the roof of the mouth. Feel weight in the heels. These gestures are not trinkets, they are keys. Doors inside open when the animal trusts the handler. Once trust is restored, urgency loses its fangs. Decisions are made from center rather than from tremor. Old loyalties to suffering can masquerade as loyalty to love. The psyche once thought endurance of chaos proved devotion. The detached one updates the covenant. Devotion proves itself in clarity, not in martyrdom. Boundaries stop being a performance of hardness and become a choreography of care. Care for the self, care for the other, care for the story. Both are writing. The sentence becomes simple. Here is what is offered. Here is what is not. No epilogue of shame, no footnotes of rage. And when the other cannot meet the offer, release is not a punishment. It is respect for gravity. Enemies shrink when their lessons are harvested. The critic reveals where courage is thin. The betrayer reveals where discernment was asleep. The manipulator reveals where hunger outpaced self-respect. After the harvest, animosity becomes unnecessary luggage. Vengeance only recycles injury through the bloodstream. The sovereign refuses the loan. Justice, when needed, is pursued cleanly. But the heart does not keep an altar for grudges. It keeps a garden for insight and an armory for principles. From that armory, the sword is drawn rarely and sheathed with gratitude. Self-talk transforms from a courtroom monologue into a commander's brief. It is short, honest, and calm. You know what to do. Breathe lower, move slower. Choose the standard over the story. You do not chase. You calibrate. You do not cling. You confirm. You do not demand. You demonstrate. Such speech shapes neurochemistry the way a river shapes stone, imperceptibly in moments, unmistakably over seasons. The person becomes trustworthy to themselves, which is the only celebrity worth having. Bit by bit, the nervous system ceases to scan the horizon for saviors. It looks inward and finds a steward setting the table. Routine, training, study, friendship with silence. In that silence, the shadow steps forward, not as a saboteur, but as a messenger. And the message is mercy. Stop trying to earn the right to exist. Existence is already paid. Use the time for something nobler than begging. Build, bless, become. Power, when rooted, stops auditioning. It becomes a standard written in the nervous system. Watch the person who learned to let loneliness be a teacher instead of a trap. They do not sprint to fill the empty room with noise. They bless the emptiness until it rings with meaning. In that acoustics, self-forgiveness arrives like rain on iron. Old scenes replay, but the director has changed. The actor who once tried to fix the past by punishing the present now bows out. A quieter figure steps forward. Call it conscience. Call it the demon Marcus Aurelius tended. It arranges the scene so that repair begins, not with a demand for retroactive love, but with a present tense vow. Never again will the self be traded for approval at the cheapest price. Generosity matures here, not the anxious generosity that hopes to buy belonging, nor the controlling generosity that keeps score, but the clean gift that expects nothing and therefore cannot be extorted. The detached soul gives from overflow, not depletion. You have felt the difference. One drains until resentment sharpens, the other pours, and then closes the tap without apology. The boundary does not make love smaller. It gives it a strong riverbed. Without structure, water floods and rots. With structure, water irrigates and sings. Observe the way conflict is reimagined. Once, a raised voice detonated stored dynamite, the shadow's horde of ancient fear. Now, the sovereign treats conflict as data. Tone is noted, content separated from contempt. Timing evaluated. If respect fails to appear, the conversation is rescheduled, not escalated. This refusal to wrestle in the mud is not avoidance, it is strategy. Epictetus would smile at the precision. You control whether to engage, how to engage, and when to step back. You do not control whether the other worships their injuries. Their altar is theirs. Yours is different. Yours faces value, not vengeance. Pleasure, too, is returned to its rightful seat. The undisciplined self makes pleasure a tyrant. The disciplined self makes it a guest. Food, attention, novelty. These are visited, enjoyed, and allowed to leave. The door does not lock from the inside. Ascetic cruelty is unnecessary. Tempered enjoyment is perfect. You learn to savor without tethering identity to the source of savor. This skill protects passion from addiction. The lover is loved, not worshipped. The craft is practiced, not idolized. The body is honored, not coerced into an image that buys applause and rents shame. Temperance becomes erotic. Self-command is attractive because it promises safety without captivity. Notice how language refines reality. The detached soul speaks in verbs more than adjectives. Build, choose, wait, bless, release. Adjectives are weather forecasts. Verbs are tools. Psychological inflation collapses beneath accurate verbs. I was ignored becomes I was not answered. I was rejected becomes they chose differently. The nervous system softens its grip on catastrophe when words stop bribing adrenaline. This is not denial, it is discernment. Seneca wrote of rehearsing adversity to blunt its teeth. The modern practice is to rehearse accuracy, to starve catastrophizing. Call storms, storms, not apocalypses. Reserve the grand names for grand moments: birth, death, betrayal, vow. Everything else can be handled with a smaller word and a steadier hand. Community transforms from a crowd into a council. The one who detaches chooses companions, who prize reality over theater, repair over gossip, virtues over vibes. You are invited to become allergic to rooms that applaud your wounds and bored by rooms that mock your discipline. Seek the circle where correction is a kindness and confidentiality is sacred. In such company, you will not be confused about who you are. Mirrors will not distort your height or shrink your courage. If the old circles resist your evolution, do not protest. Graduate. A diploma is sometimes just a quiet exit. Creative force gathers where leakage stops. Energy once spent on obsessive checking and covert bargaining returns to the forge. Ideas that were only sparks in the age of need now take flame. Output increases by subtraction. Fewer distractions, fewer people to manage, fewer identities to defend. The alchemist inside finally has the heat and time to complete a transmutation. Pain into pattern recognition, longing into literature or architecture or service, silence into music that steadies strangers. This is holy work. No trumpet is necessary. A bell inside suffices. Time finally is held as a temple. You do not kneel to it in terror. You enter it with devotion. The morning hour is a chalice reserved for setting the day's law. Midday is craftsmanship. Evening is integration. 2 questions only. What strengthened character and what asked for a better response tomorrow? This is the daily audit of a sovereign life. It does not insult the self with theatrical shame. It makes amends quickly and sleeps. Dreams then do their work, cleansing and composing. You rise to find that you ask less of the world and more of your own courage. One thing becomes obvious. Emotional detachment is not a removal from humanity. It is a return to it. When the nervous system is not held hostage, empathy increases. You can hear without absorbing drama, witness without drowning, love without losing the outline of your own country. This is how power becomes gentle. The lion lies down, not because it is tired, but because it understands that not every rustle is a hunt. You are not here to swat every shadow. You are here to keep the fire, choose the standard, and walk. Chaos once masqueraded as aliveness. The system learned to confuse intensity with intimacy, urgency with importance, the spike of cortisol with the warmth of connection. Yet the figure who has trained for sovereignty declines the carnival. This one welcomes a quieter electricity, the hum of order, the steady current of ritual. A nervous system weaned off drama begins to detect subtler music, the light shift of intuition, the low drum of values, the bell of conscience. From that music, choices are choreographed. The chase for reputation ends, the cultivation of character begins, and character does not shout. It builds chairs for truth to sit on. Family ghosts hover wherever boundaries were once porous. The triangle of rescuer, persecutor, and victim invites auditions daily. The detached soul refuses the stage directions. Instead of rescuing, responsibility is offered. Instead of persecuting, principle is stated. Instead of playing victim, agency is reclaimed. Triangulation withers when attention is removed from gossip and returned to direct conversation. Ancestral patterns that ask the child to become the parent or the partner are revised. The inner mother becomes a well of nurturance that does not require performance. The inner father becomes a pillar of law that does not confuse rigidity with safety. With both archetypal parents restored, the psyche stops outsourcing authority to strangers who resemble old pain in modern clothing. Premeditatio malorum, compassionate rehearsal, polishes resilience without summoning doom. The sovereign imagines loss not to wear sorrow early, but to loosen the grip of expectation. If the project fails, what remains? Breath, discipline, integrity. If the lover leaves, what remains? Capacity to love, intact and honorable. If the crowd forgets, what remains? The craft in the hands. These inventories reveal the indestructible core, response. Response is the only kingdom whose borders cannot be invaded. With that clarity, gratitude becomes immune to circumstance. A simple meal after honest work tastes like sovereignty. Success tests detachment as fiercely as failure. The untrained soul chases the sugar rush of approval and suffers the crash. The trained one samples the sweetness and returns to the meal of effort. Praise is thanked, not worshipped. Fortune arrives, and the sovereign asks for heavier responsibilities, not for a louder trumpet. Influence becomes a garden where dignity is grown, not a stage where emptiness performs. In victory, the lion remains lying down. No need to maul the silence to prove strength. Leadership begins with self-governance and spills outward as atmosphere. The powerful do not manipulate, they clarify. Meetings kept short, gossip interrupted gently, expectations put in writing, praise given in details, corrections delivered without humiliation. People relax around a nervous system that refuses panic. The room learns to value accuracy over drama, repair over righteousness. Such leadership is quiet, nearly invisible in its elegance, like gravity, only missed when absent. The gift is consistency. Others no longer spend their energy predicting weather. They invest in building under a stable sky. The shadow carries both wound and talent. Within it hides the capacity to focus ruthlessly, the appetite for adventure, the audacity to start again. The detached one does not exile these energies. They are escorted from the basement into the workshop and assigned tasks. Rage becomes eloquent advocacy. Envy becomes apprenticeship. Control becomes commitment to standards. Lust for novelty becomes deliberate exploration. The unconscious is thanked for its raw materials and forbidden from breaking furniture. In this way, the shadow's gold is minted into currency that circulates in service, not chaos. Forgiveness, rightly understood, is a discipline of untethering. It does not demand reunion, intimacy, or forgetting. It cuts the rope that drags the soul behind the cart of yesterday. The hand is freed for craft again. The mind, unburdened, stops composing prosecutions and begins composing poems, code, structures, gardens. Grudges, once heavy, are recognized as poor investments that pay back in fatigue. Justice remains available, pursued cleanly when necessary. But the altar for vengeance is dismantled. Its stones become steps to the workshop. The body remains the first instrument. Posture announces law before words arrive. Shoulders down and broad say, "Safety lives here." A steady gaze that neither flinches nor glares says, "Presence, not threat." Breath that settles deep says, "Nothing urgent within. Reality can be met as it is." Such signals revise the social field. Predators lose interest in a target that does not leak desperation. Healthy allies gather around a standard that does not wobble. The world, sensing mastery, offers clearer mirrors. Language continues the work, precision over poetry when poetry would seduce. The sovereign prefers structure in speech, room in silence, and verbs that move reality. Decline, proceed, amend, release. No flinching into soft qualifiers when firmness is ethical. No theatrical condemnations when quiet redirection would suffice. The nervous system trusts the mouth that does not betray it by promising what the spine cannot carry. Consider a map drawn not in roads, but in verbs that act like 7 braids, holding the crown in place. Observe. Attention returns to the breath. Name. Emotion is labeled accurately. Accept. Reality is honored as the only ground. Choose. Value selects the next clean act. Protect. Boundaries are enacted early and kindly. Create. Energy is transmuted into work. Release. Outcomes are returned to the river. These motions are not steps in a program. They are circulations in a living body, repeated until they become character. The powerful do not count them, they embody them. As seasons turn, the soul that once feared quiet begins to crave it. Solitude no longer announces exile, it announces audience with the inner law. In that court, verdicts are simple and difficult. Keep building, keep blessing, keep boundaries. The face grows peaceful, not because life became merciful, but because reliance shifted from weather to climate. Eyes look like those of someone who has seen the river and learned not to drown in it. This is not aloofness, it is intimate, grounded, alert. The hand is steady on the plow. The heart is spacious without leaking. The mind is sharp without cutting needlessly. Such a person does not chase entrances to palaces where value is rented. Such a person builds a house where truth can live. Sober joy begins to root where spectacle loses its lure. The sovereign returns from the tournament of opinions and enters a quiet atelier where beauty is practiced as discipline. Beauty here is not cosmetic, it is coherence. It shows up in a clean desk, in shoes placed carefully by the door, in the way a message is answered when it should be, and not when anxiety insists. The psyche recognizes beauty as a form of truth-telling. Edges meet edges, curves honor their arc. Nothing pretends to be other than it is. Detachment grows naturally in rooms that tell the truth. In such rooms, the shadow relaxes. It no longer needs theater to be seen. Rage, envy, hunger, and grief take chairs like dignitaries and speak when invited. They are not exiled. They are not enthroned. This is how a kingdom remains whole without becoming chaotic. Notice how purpose refines appetite. Without direction, desire becomes a field of magnets, pulling the body toward everything it thinks might erase doubt. With direction, desire learns grammar. It discovers prepositions. Toward what? Through what? For whom? The powerful soul writes sentences of action that protect attention from fragmentation. Write for 2 hours before conversation. Train the body before the body is asked to carry others. Meet conflict at the first honest opening. These lines of law do not suffocate spontaneity. They liberate it from sabotage. Spontaneity, freed from panic, becomes grace, precise, proportionate, kind. The inner mystic and the inner engineer collaborate. The mystic kneels at the altar of the present. The engineer builds scaffolds so that presence can climb. Ritual holds both. Breath counts, scheduled solitude, chosen austerities that sharpen gratitude. Gratitude under discipline is not forced, it is skilled. It recognizes the quiet sufficiencies that dramatic living cannot perceive. A back that doesn't hurt today, a friend who answers with candor, a morning that smells like rain. Such gratitude inoculates against the disease of elsewhere. When the mind stops commuting to imagined futures for oxygen, power returns to the hands. Tasks complete themselves through attention, no longer divided by fantasy's taxes. There is a romance to restraint that the undisciplined never taste. Restraint arranges encounters with reality at the pace truth can metabolize. The heart that has learned restraint can love deeply without reaching for ownership. It can admire excellence without attempting to steal it in the night. It can sit across from seduction and smile because standards have become sweet. The world feels this. Predatory energies lose leverage against a person who enjoys their own company. Flattery slides off a surface already polished by devotion to value. Manipulation fails where curiosity is not starving. Shadow integration continues as an apprenticeship in honest mirroring. The soul, tired of drama, begins to appreciate correction, the way an athlete appreciates a seasoned coach. Defense mechanisms that once swung swords at feedback now set down the blade and take notes. The correction need not be coddled. It is examined for accuracy and absorbed or dismissed without mood. This saves immeasurable time. It also attracts a higher order of companionship. People who can say, "Here is the edge you are missing," without venom are rare. People who can hear it without collapse are even rarer. Detachment makes both possible. The body's tempo sets the ethics of the voice. Rapid speech becomes rare not because velocity is sinful, but because speed tends to lie. Slow enough to feel, fast enough to mean it. This becomes the metric. When anger rises, the sovereign breathes as if cooling molten glass. The shape of the response depends on this cooling. Uncooled, anger shatters and cuts. Cooled, it becomes a vessel for truth. Many relationships are saved in the seconds it takes to let heat become form. Many opportunities are born in the minutes it takes to ask, what part of this is mine to carry, and what part belongs to another's untrained weather? The archetype of the pilgrim emerges. The pilgrim walks with little baggage, collecting wisdom instead of trophies. Detachment expresses as strategic lightness. Commitments carried deeply, possessions carried lightly. Identity worn, like a garment that can be washed and hung in the sun. This lightness does not float away from responsibility. It moves through responsibility with the elegance of someone who knows exits exist. Panic cannot rule a person who remembers available doors. And because exits exist, so do genuine choices. Consent, whether to labor, to love, to listen, becomes meaningful again. Meaning prefers a posture, upright without rigidity, receptive without collapse. From that posture, mortality is not a threat, but a sculptor. Memento mori chisels away the trivial with a patient hand. The calendar loses its demand to be crowded. Projects chosen for applause are retired. Projects that deepen character are advanced. The soul that has made peace with limits steps into paradoxical abundance. Because not everything is possible, the few worthy things can be done beautifully. There, joy thickens like honey. No rush, all richness. Even sorrow changes flavor. Grief, once an abyss, becomes a river crossed with deliberate steps. The detached soul does not shame tears, it shapes them. The shaping is simple. Let sadness reveal what was loved, then let love recommit without clinging. Loss is instructed to teach, not to tyrannize. In this, the nervous system finds its original trust again. Safety is not guaranteed by outcomes. It is generated by the steward, within, who refuses to abandon the helm. Steadily, the life begins to look like a psalm carved into stone by daily choices. There is less arguing with reality, more companionship with it. The mirror shows a face that is both tender and unbothered. The eyes tell a story. Storms were seen, roofs held, the fire stayed lit. That fire now belongs to a lineage. Stoic elders, psychological pioneers, nameless teachers made of silence and cold mornings. The lineage is not a club, it is a current. Step into it and feel how it moves through you, toward all who need steadier weather. A certain clarity arrives when a life stops bargaining with mirrors. The air changes, the posture lengthens. Decision ceases to be a referendum on worth and becomes an expression of law. The archetypal sovereign no longer auditions for rooms where admiration is a fickle currency. Presence is invested where truth compounds. This is the tone of rebirth, not fireworks, but a lamp relit and carried through hallways once haunted by opinion. The old reflexes still knock, the compulsion to explain, the urge to rehearse tragedies, the itch to peek through keyholes for reassurance. Yet the trained soul treats these as weather and returns to climate. Climate is chosen. It is shaped by standards kept in private, when no scoreboard is visible, when the only witness is conscience. The nervous system, once frantic, learns the shape of home and remains there even when thunder announces itself beyond the windows. There is a devotion to endings that honors beginnings. The sovereign closes doors cleanly, so that corridors do not echo with half-finished business. Apologies are delivered without self-flagellation. Gratitude is spoken without pretending. The wound never bled. Then the door is shut. Closure is not a spell cast on the past. It is an allegiance pledged to the future. The archetype of the craftsman returns here. Hands on the task, eyes on the line, heart steady, because it is yoked to meaning, not mood. Meaning no longer depends on applause. It depends on alignment. Alignment is the quiet mathematics of value plus action multiplied by time. This arithmetic is not glamorous, and that is why it works when glamour fails. Joy changes its accent. It no longer shouts across rooms for attention. It hums like a hearth. The body participates, breath moving like a tide that trusts the moon, muscles unarmored, jaw free of the bite meant for ghosts. In this physiology of safety, the mind's sharpness is not dulled, it is refined. The world becomes legible again, a field of choices, not a battlefield of verdicts. Compassion expands without losing its boundaries. One can listen to grief without catching it like a fever. One can witness rage without dancing to its drum. One can love without dissolving into the beloved. Detachment, finally understood, is not a moat around the castle. It is the mastery of the drawbridge. The inner parliament keeps its order. The king or queen sets law. The warrior enforces it without cruelty. The lover keeps warmth in the palace. The magician updates the maps so that the kingdom does not worship obsolete roots. Collectively, they answer the only question that matters when storms approach. What is mine to carry? Not yesterday's prophecy, not another's untrained weather, not fantasies that hire panic to write policy. What is mine to carry is response. Accurate, proportionate, timely. When response is clean, shame retires. It has no function. When shame is gone, dignity breathes. Dignity, more than bravado, is what predators smell and reconsider. Simplicity becomes luxury. Rooms declutter. Speech shortens. Digital thresholds are guarded by principle, not by mood. The calendar protects the hours where psyche meets silence and work meets wonder. In those hours, the lineage of Stoics becomes palpable, not as a museum of quotes, but as a current one steps into and is carried by. Seneca's economy, Epictetus's fierce boundary between control and weather, Marcus's lantern of perspective, all live here, updated by modern wisdom about trauma and nervous systems. The organism is loved into discipline and disciplined into love until these words stop being opposites. The result is a self that can be trusted by the self. Trust replaces infatuation with freedom. Freedom renders the marketplace secondary. Achievement is no longer an intravenous line for identity. It is an offering. Work is crafted with clean hands, then given to the river of outcomes without pleading. If it returns with laurels, the laurels are hung on the wall, not worn like oxygen masks. If it returns with silence, the silence is treated like winter, time to tend roots. Either way, the vow holds. Act in accordance with virtue. Leave the results to the wider weather. This vow unhooks the soul from the seesaw of other people's mournings. The individual, integrated, becomes a sanctuary for others without becoming their solution. Presence itself heals, not by rescuing, not by persuading, but by modeling a nervous system that refuses to leak. Those who enter this atmosphere often find their own law remembered. Some stay, some depart. Both are blessed. Detachment makes room for choice on both sides. Love is no longer a leash, it is a lane. Partnership, friendship, leadership, each becomes a meeting of sovereigns at a border. Both respect. At last, the pilgrim inside reaches a clearing. The landscape is neither utopia nor exile. It is real. A river writes its silver sentence through the field. The mountains hold their counsel. The sky is wide and unbothered. Here, the old bargains are set down like broken tools. The hands receive new ones, patience that cuts like a blade, clarity that warms like bread, courage that moves like a quiet animal at dusk. From this clearing, the path bends forward. Not every step is known, but the gate is sure. Attention is a prayer. Action is a promise. Outcome is a visitor. What remains is the crown no one can see and everyone can feel. Self-respect worn so naturally, it looks like peace. The world will still speak, sometimes with love, sometimes with confusion, sometimes with praise dressed as a trap. The sovereign hears everything and chooses one response: fidelity to value. From that fidelity springs a sentence that no longer trembles as it leaves the mouth, a boundary that no longer shakes as it stands in a doorway, a kindness that no longer apologizes for its own strength. And in that steadiness, a final truth stands up and walks out into the day, ready to be lived rather than argued.